Welcome back, fight fans. Welcome back. Let's just dig right into it. This is the first edition of What's Next with the IBFP. So basically, what's next with the IBFP is basically, looking as to what's next with the fighters after they get through with their current fight. So the first episode is Canelo Alvarez. Should he be successful against Danny Jacobs on Cinco de Mayo weekend? What's next for Canelo Alvarez? Canelo Alvarez has already stated that he's interested in fighting up to 3 times this year. He's looked at many different potential fights, but you have to understand, even though Canelo Alvarez is an elite level fighter, he's one of the best fighters in the world, he's one of the top pound for pound fighters in the world. Even all those things are true, you can't expect Canelo Alvarez to face the top elite level competition each and every fight. No fighter does that. Floyd Mayweather never did it. No fighter in history has ever done that. Each and every fight back to back has been an elite fighter, has been the very best in the division. You can't expect that. Although I do believe Canelo Alvarez will look to unify the division this year, I don't believe he'll take elite level opponents back to back. I think Canelo Alvarez will end up taking his mandatory opponent in September and then again in December fighting a different opponent. I think that that's ultimately what Canelo Alvarez will do, because if you break down the situation that we have here is that Canelo Alvarez, should he be successful against Danny Jacobs, and we're not overlooking Danny Jacobs, we understand that's a very difficult fight. In my opinion, it's a 50-50 fight, but I give Canelo Alvarez the edge because there's a variety of factors that are working in his favor, such as fighting a certain elite level of fighters. For his experience overall is a little bit better than Danny Jacobs. The fact that Canelo Alvarez has shown a granite chin, the fact that Canelo Alvarez seems to be an elite level body puncher as well. Canelo Alvarez has shown certain skill sets, and Danny Jacobs has also shown a tendency to get hurt at times. So that doesn't mean that Danny Jacobs couldn't beat Canelo. I think that's a very close fight, a 50-50 fight, but ultimately I think that more likely than not, Canelo Alvarez may be able to get past Danny Jacobs, and if he's successful, I think his next fight would be more of a second tier type of fighter. With that being said, I believe the second tier type of fighter for Canelo Alvarez, because you don't expect these type level fighters to face the very best fight after fight after fight. The second tier fighter, the mandatory challenger for Canelo Alvarez, would ultimately be a Jermall Charlo. So if you look at Jermall Charlo, the WBC has kind of put him off for a while. I believe he's the WBC silver champion at 160 pounds. So he's not a full-fledged champion. He's not a world champion at 160, but he should be sitting at the number one mandatory spot. We already know that Triple G and Jermall Charlo fight has been ordered, but we all know that Triple G has no reason to take that fight because it's not a big payday, and he doesn't even have to comply with the WBC's orders for one reason. He's going to get the Canelo Alvarez fight regardless of their mandates, regardless of their order. So why would Triple G force a fight with Jermall Charlo when it's not a payday? It's basically just an easy fight for Triple G, but other than that, these guys are on two different promotional networks. There's no incentive for that fight to happen. But with Canelo Alvarez and Jermall Charlo, seeing how Triple G and Jermall Charlo are going to take different interim fights, I truly believe that Jermall Charlo is next for Canelo Alvarez after his fight this summer, and after Canelo Alvarez, gets past Danny Jacobs, and we're assuming that he gets past Danny Jacobs in this particular edition of What's Next, then I believe Canelo Alvarez and Jermall Charlo would happen in September. I believe this is the course of events that are aligning, because you can't expect Canelo Alvarez to face 3 top-level guys in one particular year. You just simply can't expect that. You expect Canelo to face high-level competition each and every time out, but not the very best of the best. So when you look at Danny Jacobs and Canelo Alvarez, and should Canelo be successful, you can't expect Canelo to face a Demetrius Andre and a Triple G and a Danny Jacobs all in one year. I just don't simply see that happening. Also, the WBC is going to have to call that mandatory eventually, and I think it's only right and only fitting that Canelo Alvarez on the next Mexican holiday take a Jermall Charlo in September. I believe that'll be a huge fight, a huge clash. And if we break down that fight, we look at a Jermall Charlo who struggled against a Matt Korobov. You never heard anything about all these biased fanboys saying anything about Matt Korobov before the Jermall Charlo fight. There was not much ranting and raving about Matt Korobov before the fight at all. And after the fight was done, And after he gave Jermall Charlo all kinds of fits and problems, you hear all these guys saying what a high level and a top level competition this guy is. But the truth be told is, no matter what fighter fought Jermall Charlo and gave him a hard fight, I think at the end of the day, that's who these guys would fanboy and pump up. You look at Willie Monroe Jr. He was scheduled to face Willie Monroe Jr. before he fought Matt Korobov, and we all know that Willie Monroe Jr. was already stopped by Triple G. See, Jermall Charlo has a tendency of facing second-tier fighters who's already been stopped, fighters who already been beat. This is his MO. And when he looks at Jermall Charlo stepping up to an elite level, a top level opponent, he seems to avoid those guys. Like with Danny Jacobs, he's already stated out of his own mouth that the Danny Jacobs fight will happen before he's retired, but he is in absolutely no rush to face Danny Jacobs anytime soon. When Danny Jacobs confronted him and called him out, there was nothing. After Danny Jacobs had another fight in Brooklyn, said he's the king of Brooklyn, called him out, still no response from Jermall Charlo. So at the end of the day, if we're being honest and unbiased, Jermall Charlo really has looked to avoid the biggest and best competition, similar to a Deontay Wilder. He seems to be willing to sell his O to the highest bidder, and the highest bidder would be Saul Canelo Alvarez, because that will be his biggest and highest payday. So it looks like Jermall Charlo is angled to get a mandatory position to face Canelo Alvarez for the biggest payday of his career, and there's no shame in losing to a Canelo Alvarez. I think Canelo Alvarez and Jermall Charlo, should they fight in September, I think it'll be a thrilling, exciting fight. I think it'll be an action-packed fight. But ultimately, I believe Canelo Alvarez will stop, Jermall Charlo to the body, probably about the 6th to the 8th round. I just don't see Jermall Charlo being able to go the distance with Canelo Alvarez's speed, athleticism, skills, body shots. I think Jermall Charlo gets hit too much, and that was exposed against the Matt Korobov fight. You've never really seen Jermall Charlo be able to get at least a decent B-level opponent out, and that's being extremely generous to an Austin Trout, and he wasn't able to stop Austin Trout. He wasn't able to stop Matt Korobov, and these are guys who've been stopped. So when you look at a Canelo Alvarez, you see that, his power is elite level. I truly believe that Matt Korobov will cause ultimate problems and stop Jermall Charlo, because there's nothing on Jermall Charlo's resume at the top level that would be able to prove that Canelo Alvarez wouldn't be able to stop him. You look at it and you have a lot of fanboys that say, well, Canelo Alvarez has never stopped an elite opponent. He didn't stop Floyd. He didn't stop Lara, and he didn't stop Triple G. You're absolutely right, because Lara was on his bicycle the whole fight, and Floyd Mayweather was extremely defensive. But I believe had he caught either one of those guys, he would have been able to stop them. But on the other hand, Jermall Charlo is not elusive as, Floyd Mayweather or an Islandi Lara. On the other end, Canelo Alvarez, when he fought Triple G, he hurt Triple G multiple times in that fight. Believe it or not, Triple G took and sustained a lot of punishment. We don't know if Jermall Charlo is able to stand up to that type of punishment, because at this point he's still unproven at this level. Canelo Alvarez is the most proven fighter in the division. He's number 1 overall, and I truly believe Canelo Alvarez will stop Jermall Charlo between the 6th and the 8th round. That is what's next after the Danny Jacobs fight, should Canelo Alvarez be successful. Canelo Alvarez, Jermall Charlo, you can see the future before it happens. If you're being honest and unbiased, you see that this is a future matchup that should happen this year, because the WBC should be looking to call this mandatory at some point this year. And you also have to understand that Canelo Alvarez is not going to take 3 of the top elite level opponents back to back to back in one particular year. No top level fighter does that. But once again, unbiased as always, it's the IBFP. Please share, like, and you must absolutely subscribe.